Welcome to Advent of Tessellations 2024. My name is Madonna Yoder, and you're joining hundreds of folders around the world on this 25-day journey into the infinite world of repeating patterns folded from a single sheet of paper. You'll discover many different twists in this challenge, building up to advanced patterns with hybrid hexagon twists. In day 19 of Advent of Tess, we're going to be using these two-fold rectangle hybrid hexagon twists for the first time. It's going to be relatively close to the paper, although not exactly on the edge. So if you want to practice these in a more kind of secure position on the grid, definitely check out the twists used in Advent of Tess video to see how to practice those on their own. And we're going to start with a closed hexagon twist with closed triangle twists all around. There's a lot of different ways to add these hybrid hexagons after that start. We'll be seeing another way with a different hybrid hexagon tomorrow. But for today, we can go ahead and dive in. I will be using a 24-fold triangle grid on a hexagon, and you can see instructions on how to fold that grid and the crease pattern for today's tutorial when you're signed up for email reminders at training.gatheringfolds.com/advent. So let's go ahead and put that closed hexagon twist in the center of the paper. I'm going to have mountain folds going straight out to the corners of the paper and valley folds one grid spacing above on the right hand side. I'm going to fold one pleat entirely and then pass it off to my left hand, making sure that pleat doesn't go really even to the center of the paper, stops just shy of the center of the paper, while I fold the next twist, the next pleat and the next pleat, and I'm passing them off, making sure that there's a flat area, a fully folded area on each of these pleats as I'm going around and around. That's going to ensure that these pleats don't come undone and I don't have to go chasing the same mountain folds over and over and over again. Once those pleats are all folded, I'll start bringing that that fully folded area closer and closer to the center. And now that I have that hexagon tower, I'm stopping 2 grid spacings from the center of the paper, and I'm going to bop it a little bit in the center, grab it, and squeeze slightly as I twist around. This will not look pretty right away. The faster you twist, the prettier it usually is, but it always needs a little bit of ironing out, of checking that the folds actually did stay on the grid lines to make these hexagon twists look pretty. So just because yours doesn't look pretty right when it's twisted down does not mean it's wrong, does not mean it will not look pretty. It just means that it doesn't look pretty yet. So from this closed hexagon twist, I'm going to add closed triangle twists at tube pleat spacing. So my valley folds will be 1 space out from the folded mountains. My mountain folds will be 1 space further. And putting that closed triangle twist in place, I need to erase the extension of the existing pleat past the target grid intersection, where I will run my 3rd grid direction out as a mountain, forming a 3-way intersection of mountain folds, laying those pleats down on valley folds 1 grid spacing away from those mountain folds in a way that allows me to twist around and squash. And then my next triangle twist will be in a clockwise direction around so that I'm setting up pleat overlaps that are nice to open on the opposite side of the paper. So next up, I'm going to have a valley fold, 1 grid spacing from the folded mountain, a mountain fold, 1 grid spacing further. Folding those 2 in place, I'm opening only the bottom of this tube pleat leaving the top pleat fully folded as I fold through it with my third direction of this closed triangle twist and squash. And rotate. I'll repeat again, this time without drawing on my paper. Valley fold one spacing from the folded mountain, mountain fold one spacing further so that when they're folded, these pleats come together and form a tube. Then I'm opening the bottom of my previous tube pleat and setting up the third direction of mountain fold around my three-way intersection at the intersection point of the two mountain folds I already defined. And pressing to squash, this creates a pleat overlap with the pleat from the previous triangle, which was the top of the tube. One indication that you're keeping your spacing consistent is that the corners of these triangle twists will touch each other. Rotating again, I'll repeat exactly the same, finding my tube pleat, which gives me the target grid intersection for the center of my closed triangle twist, creating a pleat overlap off to the right, and squashing my new triangle twist. I'll rotate and repeat again exactly the same for my fifth closed triangle. And now for my sixth closed triangle, I'm going to do most of the steps exactly the same with one step slightly different. So we've been doing a lot of compound wraps so far. That's exactly what I'm going to do on this final pleat. This should be familiar from days 7 and 8, where we were folding a closed or open hexagon, really a hexagon, and then triangles on the same side, and then the next hexagon on the other side. So this is the same idea, but we're going to be putting a hybrid hexagon. So I've got that same spacing with the valley one space out from the folded mountain. We don't really see the tube at the edge of the paper because this pleat has already been used to form a triangle twist. And as my valley is coming out, it's hitting this existing mountain fold, and it's going to bounce around. So this is the grid line that would continue straight, but the valley is going to bounce instead, and it's going to hit the existing valley underneath and continue out to the edge of the paper, bouncing once again. And of course, it's not just a valley. So we can get the valley in place, but in order to get things to lay flat, we also need to have mountain folds following our valley one grid spacing away. And then we're going to see the continuation of that existing pleat on the same grid lines it was already on, heading out to the edge of the paper. So that's our compound wrap. And then we'll fold our closed triangle twist as usual, leaving a pleat overlap in the space between our new triangle and the previous triangle. So now, flipping the paper over, we're going to have all hybrid hexagon twists in the 6 positions around the center. This is where I have that compound wrap. Notice the zigzagging in there. And just outside of the compound wrap, I have an area with more space to work. So you'll notice there's more space here than there is here or any of these other identical locations. So this is where I want to work just around clockwise from the compound wrap. Now, if you're looking at the crease pattern, so if you signed up at training.gatheringfolds.com/advent, you can see that I drew this crease pattern from this side of the paper, so we can see exactly how those pleats are going into the hybrid hexagon twist. And what I see in that crease pattern is that the pleat coming from the, I'm going to call it the upper triangle, is an open type pleat, and the pleat coming from the lower triangle, and now I'm actually in the same orientation as that crease pattern, the pleat coming from the lower triangle, so we've got a horizontal pleat and a diagonal pleat. This diagonal pleat is a closed type pleat. So opening up the pleat overlap, I'm going to extend the mountain fold on the same grid line of the horizontal mountain, the one from the upper triangle. Now this is going to go 2 spaces past where this diagonal pleat, this closed type pleat, comes in until it hits the next mountain fold. And one cue that you can use if you're using 24 grid divisions is that this new mountain fold is 2 spaces in from the edge. So when we fold the mountain and the valley is going to be even closer to the edge, we're going to be folding right over on top of the edge of the paper. So those are the 3 pleats that I'm going to have: open, closed, open, and now I need copies of that across from the center, which are going to be open, closed, open. I'm going to slow down and explain exactly how I came up with those. So for starters, if we were looking at a 3-fold hybrid hexagon, we would be seeing a giant triangle like that. But since this is a 2-fold rectangle hybrid hexagon, we're actually going to see this closed pleat continue out as a closed pleat on the other side. And this horizontal pleat is going to be copied 2 spaces away as another horizontal pleat. And whenever we have these long edges in the hybrid hexagons, they're going 1, 2, 3 grid spacings. So then my final open type pleat is coming in 2 spaces away from the opposite side mountain fold, 2 spaces as you cross the center, and then the valley is on the far side. So here 2 of the edges of this rectangle are exactly like an open hexagon twist, and then the other 2 edges are exactly like the edges of the 3-fold hybrid hexagon twist. So we can go ahead and squash all of those edges to get our new twist in place. And now that we've got this twist in place, we're going to rotate so that the next overlap, notice I'm going further from the compound wrap. So now the next overlap is coming up, and I have some extra cues now. For starters, I learned that this outer pleat has its mountain fold 2 spaces from the edge. Then I also learned that this mountain fold, when it's folded, leaves a 1 spacing gap relative to this identical part of the center. So I could go ahead and use that information and say, okay, I've got this folded mountain. I need to leave a 1 spacing gap, so I'm going to go 2 spaces away to mark my next valley. And then 1 space after that is my new mountain. This new mountain is running into an existing pleat at 120 degrees. And I know I'm going to need triangles between these outer hexagons, because we always need, like when we're doing a hexagon and then 6 triangles and then 6 hexagons, we always need 6 more triangles. So I can go ahead and set up that triangle. It's going to be a closed triangle on this side, but I'm going to lay it down as a 3-way intersection while I'm setting up my hybrid hexagon twist. From there, I'll open up my pleat overlap, making sure to extend the mountain fold from my top triangle, and it's going 1, 2 past the intersection with the mountain of the lower triangle before I get my new mountain fold coming in parallel to the edge, 2 spacings from the edge, and then I've got these teeny tiny little 1 grid spacing bits of mountain fold for my 2 remaining pleats that are free. This one is in line with this parallel grid line, 2 spaces from the long edge on the other side. And then this one is in line with the same mountain fold going through the center line. So that's how I'm setting up this rectangle hybrid hexagon twist. And then I can kind of press the open hexagon type edges and make sure to dimple those little pockets under the hybrid, the 3-fold hybrid type edges. And now I want to return to my triangle twist, because the type of triangle that we fold here determines whether all of these twists, frankly, are being used as positions of rotational symmetry in the broader pattern. So in this case, the closed triangle twist is the solution for using this position as a location of 3-fold rotational symmetry. And we can see that that works because there's 2 spaces between the corner of the triangle and the corner of the hybrid hexagon on both sides. So that already guarantees that we can put a new hybrid hexagon 2 spaces out from this corner, and that will continue the pattern. And what's required here is that we use a 2-fold symmetric hybrid hexagon twist, and then that the triangle has its corners evenly spaced from those hexagons. And that will guarantee our symmetry to continue the pattern. It's not the only symmetry that can be used, but it's the one that's used for all of the alternate endings for today's pattern in the Crease Pattern ebook. So you'll find some different orientations of the hybrid hexagon. You'll see a copy where everything is smushed 1 spacing together, which looks remarkably like a Japanese stitching technique called sashiko. And you'll also see a variation where we have the same center, but then put these hybrid hexagons on the same side as the central twists. But anyways, coming back to repeats of this, we'll go around exactly like we folded these 2 twists, where we're seeing this structure of, okay, my valley going into the triangle is going to be 2 spaces out from my existing folded mountain and from this long edge of the rectangle. So my mountain is going to be 1 space further from that. I'll take this as a 3-way intersection instead of as a pleat overlap. And this basically runs this pleat out in a direction that can't be touched by any of the pleats coming from this hexagon, no matter how much grid we're using. Like, no matter how much grid we're using, this pleat is still parallel to this pleat. And then opening the pleat overlap, the top of those two triangle pleats is going to continue out. And I've got this in one, out one from the open hexagon puffy star, but then this corner is tucked under. So I've got that in one, out one, and I'm continuing 1, 2, 3 grid spacings. So in the earlier renditions, I gave the references that are easier to see if you're not familiar with these twists, and now I'm giving the references that are easier to see if you are familiar with these twists. So now I have a new in one, out one. I need another flat edge, and this final pleat is going straight in to the center. And we can start to squash our twist. So these little pillows, I'm making sure that I can have a valley fold straight across in there. Go ahead and draw that with the pen. So we needed to have that little ridge as a mountain for setting up our twist, but as soon as it's time to squash, that mountain disappears and we cross it with a valley. And again, if you want to practice this twist individually, there's a whole video on how to practice each of the twists individually that are used in Advent of Tess this year, either on YouTube, in the Advent of Tess 2024 playlist, or on my website, in the course option, and also on the hub page when you sign up at training.gatheringfolds.com/advent. So I just took that three-way intersection and flipped the free pleat to squash the closed triangle twist. And now I'll repeat without drawing. So I'm going to have those two spaces from the existing folded mountain and my new valley fold. So I leave a one spacing gap in between. And then opening up my pleat overlap, I'm going to extend the mountain fold of the upper pleat, the one that's laying on top of the lower pleat, which also happens to be up relative to the orientation of the video. And then I'm putting in another open type pleat, which happens to be parallel to the edge of the paper and 2 spaces away on a 24 fold grid. And putting in these 2 little tiny bits of pleat that are the edge of the top of the rectangle and the final pleat coming in to the center. And with those in place, we can go ahead and squash this new hybrid hexagon twist. And then flip the pleat to squash the new closed triangle. So for the 5th hybrid hexagon, I'm going to show how I would fold it at full speed. I'm going to set up the triangle, open the overlap, find that pleat that's going around the edge. It's got a little extra finicky bit here to make sure it's laying flat among those layers, and find the pleat that lays across the top and the second pleat that comes into the center, and squash. With this size of grid, sometimes I don't use the bone folder very much for squashing those pillows underneath. And flip the pleat of the triangle to squash the new triangle twist. Okay, so we're getting around to the final hybrid hexagon twist. It's going to have two triangles, one on either side. So I'm going to start by opening up the pleat overlap and by finding my triangle above. So the center of this triangle, one way to think about it is the valley is two spacings from the folded mountain. Another way to think about it is that the intersection at the center of the triangle is 1, 2, 3 spaces from the corner of the existing right triangle. And then I need to find the triangle below. So I'm going to have that pleat that's parallel to the edge of the paper and 2 grid spacings away. That's going to run into this existing pleat, and I'm going to lay that triangle down as a 3-way intersection. And then I just need to find these little fiddly bits on the edge, one parallel or the same grid line as the top of the rectangle, which is 2 spaces wide, and the other coming straight in to the center of my rectangle. And squash. So this was a nice leisurely introduction to the twofold hybrid hexagon twist that looks like a rectangle. And by the way, we still need to squash those 2 closed triangles yet. And this will be building up towards using this hybrid hexagon twist in denser and denser situations over the coming days. But tomorrow we're actually going to work on a different hybrid hexagon twist with the same stuff in the center. And this is going to be the twofold diamond hybrid hexagon twist, which also works out to fold in multiple different orientations around this same center. So if you need help with this, definitely make sure to ask on Discord on my server, which you get access to when you sign up at training.gatheringfolds.com/advent for those email reminders and crease patterns. And make sure when you post on social media to tag me at Gathering Folds so I can share it for everyone to see, and use hashtag Advent of Tess or Advent of Tess 24 so everyone knows where you found all of these beautiful patterns to fold. So happy folding, everybody, and see you for the next tutorial tomorrow.